Today begins an important project in Asturis, and that is building the city on the coastline of the Space Elevator Bay, completing the part where all those older custom bridges aim to. That is exactly the topic for today. Finish the fancy, colorful bridges going from the downtown, so they don't look like they go nowhere. We will build a square with plenty of lights and colors, a beach on the coastline, and some very high-density, futuristic-looking blocks of buildings. Let's go. And we will start by building this square, at least like rough outline of this square on the side of this bridge. Now, this is that arch bridge from a long time ago. It is the one that lights up during the night with those purple lines and red lights and all of these things. And it doesn't have any kind of roads running on it. It only has trams and pedestrians. So that's exactly what we need to do also over here. We don't really need to provide any kind of intersection, big intersection, or anything related to roads at the waterfront directly, which is somewhat easier. I only need to provide some kind of a tram stop, of course, which is immediately like an interesting opportunity for some kind of a square, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, apart from that, the bridge doesn't really define anything on this side of the river. So it's this kind of a project where I just need to think of some initial idea, I suppose, apart from the square, of course, but establish some sort of a street line perhaps, or just some kind of idea how to continue away from the square. So at first I was thinking I'm just going to do maybe some sort of suburb already and not really going to overdo it. But then I figured it's not really going to complement the bridge very well if there's just going to be something very low and not very interesting. So we have to continue with high density, at least for a couple of blocks in the immediate vicinity of the bridge. And then we can gradually, well, actually kind of suddenly, more like quickly, follow some sort of lower density style, yeah? So this is somewhat going to be a little extension of the downtown, at least density-wise. It's really going to be very dense. It's going to have these blocks of buildings that are just clipped together. A couple of these buildings will be procedural objects, so I can, nicely fit them to some of these shapes that I have going on here. And, all the usual kind of downtown-y stuff that we have done previously in Asturis as well, right? So before I started with this area, I took a picture and I just opened it in MS Paint and I was just drawing some preliminary lines of the streets and blocks of buildings and these kinds of things. And I eventually decided that I'm actually going to go for some kind of a grid in this place. It's not really going to be like 90-degree roads, but it is going to help me establish some of these high-density blocks at the coastline. Now, there are going to be, I suppose, two main roads, or I don't know, infrastructure lines, let's call them. Now, one of them is going to be this one, that's going to have the tram. It's not particularly a huge road, although it obviously needs to be wide to accommodate the trams. Later on this road, there's going to be a tram stop, so there needs to be some kind of a median. But it's only going to have a single lane for cars in each direction. It's not going to have any parking, anything like that. And later I'm actually going to put trees instead of these pavement medians in here where we don't have the tram stop just yet. Yeah, the tram stop is going to be a topic for some other episode actually on this road. Today we are only going to focus on the stop at the square directly. Yeah. Now, where was I? Right, so that's going to be the first road. Now, the second road is going to originate at that second bridge that's further upstream. That's the bridge that has the railway on top and the avenue, kind of like an important road down below. So that's going to be the second, more busier car road in this area, but it's going to be like bypassing this area. I'm not really going to focus on that road that much in this episode, because it's not really going to be working with this particular city block directly. Yeah, it's just going to be bypassing it, going into some kind of future projects that I already built. on this coastline, but I don't want to spoil it too much, yeah? So that's going to be the second road. And then there are just going to be some kind of streets, establishing these kinds of city blocks, and that's going to be basically it. Right, so just to bring more colors into this area, really, I decided to make a beach in this place because I was really satisfied with that first beach that we did some time ago already, actually a long time, fairly long time ago, because it was nicely complementing the green areas. I really like the contrast of the sand and trees, especially. But in this place, just so we don't have it exactly the same as before, we are going to make it mixed with the buildings a little more. So there's going to be this fairly tall wall, quay, I'm not really sure what it's called. And then there are going to be the buildings on the top and the beach at the bottom. Yeah, there's not really going to be any kind of like a slope of some cliff or anything like that. Just like we have it on that bigger beach at the downtown. Yeah, there we created some kind of a sloped area with lots of natural details. In here, it's going to be a little bit more compact. Now, I suppose that this beach is also going to be a lot smaller. I have not finished it just yet because it's going to be kind of a big beach, so it's going to make its appearance in 3 different episodes, I believe. This one and then 2 more building episodes. And I haven't finished those just yet, so I'm not quite sure how big it's going to be. But it's probably going to be smaller than that downtown one, that's for sure. But it's probably going to be enclosed by these retaining walls or these quays on all sides because I really want to have some kind of elevation going in this area. Later I'm going to create some kind of like a little bay and some sort of other natural details, but I suppose I'm already spoiling things. That's just going to be the topic of some future episodes. No point talking about it now. Let's focus more on what I'm actually building here. Right, so the beach needs some kind of an access, yeah? In that previous beach, that was much more straightforward. I only needed to do some sort of, paths on the sloped terrain down towards the beach. In here, we don't have that. We have the harsh retaining walls, so we need to provide some kind of stairs. Now, I'm not really going to build any kind of elevators or something like that. So apart from stairs, the only access to the beach is going to be from the bridge. There's going to be like a ramp that people from this side can actually use as well. Yeah, they're just going to go towards the beach, as you can see. Towards the bridge and kind of circle around on the ramp down towards the beach. But some kind of elevators or other ramps would just not look very well in this place. The stairs needs to be quite long as well. Yeah, so ramp would not really work. And by the way, I completely forgot to mention the main motivation for building in this part of the city. I already said that in the previous video, but the next episode is going to be the first-person ride from the tram, from the coastline tram. And this place is very much visible from the first-person perspective. So that's why I needed to go here. That's why I needed to build something in here. And that's why I needed to build something high density in here, because it's going to look so much better if there is like a wall of buildings on the coastline. That's just going to create that super high density, somewhat futuristic feel that Asturis is probably supposed to have, yeah? And the first person perspective definitely should see that. Right? So that is the main motivation behind today's project. But I suppose it's kind of nice because it's finally an excuse to go here, build something over here. And in the next building episodes, we will stay at this coastline, I suppose for 3 episodes in total. And we are just going to complete the city in here, which is just going to look nice in other cinematics as well, not just the first person. And I suppose this is kind of a preparation for yet another first-person ride, this time this tram that we are looking at right here, because that's going to go on the bridge, on the arch bridge, and I'm really looking forward to that one. Definitely gonna do that one at night, yeah, because the bridge is just so much better looking during the night, and the tram going through it, yeah, that's going to look really good. I'm really looking forward to that one. So I suppose that after we are done with this coastline, this like overall area, we are most likely going to go to the other side of the city, to the stadium area, roughly, and continue the city from there, yeah? So we can finally do this line, and we can finally do a ride on this line as well. Right, so those were the motivations. Now, let's catch up with the time lapse. So, as you can see, I'm mostly done, roughly, with the shape of the square, the buildings around it, and also on the coastline. So that's exactly creating that wall of buildings that I was really aiming for. I already explained why. Now, I also want to do exactly the same thing over here in this area between the fancier arch bridge and this older suspension bridge, yeah, which has the road and the railway on top. So we are going to continue with this quay over here, although I'm not going to build the beach in this place, yeah? The beach is only going to be on the coastline, but on this riverfront, that's not where the beach is going to continue. I will do some kind of like indications of like pockets of sand or something. So the sand on the beach is not like suddenly appearing at the beach, yeah? But there's like some sort of transition area, I suppose, yeah? Let's call it that. And then I'm just going to fill this place with lots of rocks and trees and, you know, the usual. Yeah, that's going to look really, really good. This particular place that I'm building here is still going to be visible from the first person ride. I made sure, because I was constantly checking what I need to build today, so that it's going to look completed from the first person perspective, yeah? So we are not going to complete, by the way, all of these blocks behind the coastline, yeah, because I don't really need to for the first person ride. Now, what exactly is going on in the time lapse right now? What are these structures that are going from that coastline road, pedestrian path, into the river area? Well, I'm not really sure myself what these are supposed to be. Probably some kind of residential buildings, maybe even some offices, commercial buildings. Well, they can be just about anything, but I just wanted to create something interesting on the coastline. Yeah, we are in Asturis. I said like billion times before that in Asturis I'm just building things how I really want to, not really thinking too much about it, and this is exactly one of those cases. So we have this red pedestrian path on the waterfront, just like on the other side of the river. I was explaining it there. I don't want to really waste the waterfront with some kind of car infrastructure, because that would just cut off the waterfront from the rest of the area pretty much. So I'm just trying to blend it together, all of this, and I suppose this is the result. So we have this road pretty tall above the water. It's not really interacting with the waterfront, let's say. But, I mean, it is the waterfront, but not interacting with the river, yeah? But what else am I going to place down there, you know, towards the river? Just some kind of trees, rocks, and that's it? It would be just like super ordinary waterfronts that you have probably already seen like million times before, yeah? I suppose I have built something like that before as well. So let's just do something more interesting. Let's just put these buildings in here. Let's just light them up during the night with some interesting colors. Let's put some crazy details on top of them. You know, this is Asturis, so I really need to just do something a little bit more interesting. And this is exactly that, yeah? So this is exactly one of those cases where I'm not really thinking about it too much, to be completely honest. I'm just building some kind of shapes, some kind of sculptures, and later I'm going to think about what this might even be, yeah? Although, to be honest, I skipped that step in here. It's up to you to think whatever you want about these buildings, what their purpose might be. But they are looking really good. They are looking really, really nice. And there is actually some kind of symmetrical geometry going on there, because this older bridge, it's also not exactly perpendicular to that waterfront. And, well, because it has those two networks kind of in an X shape going on the bridge. So there are two different angles that are arriving at this waterfront. So I also did that brick path, so it's going to be perpendicular to that network which is closest to it, yeah? So there is this like an angle. Well, I suppose you have seen that in the time lapse and you will see that in the cinematics, yeah? That it's not exactly completely straight, this red pedestrian path right on the waterfront. And there's also this bend between the two bridges, and that's exactly where I did this symmetrical pattern with those buildings. So in the center, there are 5 in total, these buildings. In the center, there's like a tallest version, which also goes above and kind of covers this pedestrian path. So with procedural objects, I cut like an entrance to it. I suppose that it's not just the passage for the red path, but it's also entrance to the building, of course, but maybe also entrance underground to these other buildings, yeah? Although these other buildings might be accessible maybe from some other residential blocks around it. Maybe all of these blocks are just interconnected inside. These buildings are clipped together already, so might as well consider them to be just one big complexes. Residential, most likely. And, functionally in the city, they are actually residential buildings because I really need to increase that residential capacity in the city. I already explained it a billion times before because I really want to have the space elevator super busy. And it's already getting super busy, actually. I already had to do some fixes at the main transportation hub because the flying trains are actually not keeping up anymore. We have so huge crowds of people already using the main hub. So that is amazing to see, really. It's actually causing some issues. People are sometimes getting stuck in some different places. I need to just shuffle around the pedestrian paths ends a little so that pedestrians get unstuck. For some reasons they do that. And FPS in that main transportation hub is really bad because of all the pedestrian models if they are stuck there. So that is just something that I need to fix from time to time. But it's definitely the preferred situation because it is very, very busy. I remember episode 2, 3 or something like that when we were putting together the main transportation hub, and it was completely bare. It was just completely abandoned. Kind of felt like that. Yeah, there was just some fake vehicles moving around. But these days, it's finally doing what it's supposed to do. And I suppose that you will all see that with some kind of first-person rides. Not exactly all that soon, but, soon trademark as always. Well, anyway, enough of that. Let's actually talk about what you can see in the time-lapse. So I'm just doing some kind of details with these structures and doing some surfaces because I heavily changed the shapes of these structures. I cut off the roofs, for example, so I had to remodel these roofs. Now, on the lowest buildings, I simply used the pedestrian path and made it wider with node controller and just exactly fit the end shape with the distance value in node controller. You can, by the way, do that in freeform in node controller renewal as well these days. And then I just put these planters in the middle because why not? There is going to be some nice space for some trees to provide some shade and all of that. Now that middle level with that building going towards the river, I decided to put like an orange colored surface in there, which has roughly the same tone as the brick path below it. And on the roof of that tallest building, I decided to put some antennas, some kind of decals to make it look a little rough and all of this, yeah? I don't really want to create every single roof in Asturis green. I do still want to achieve this somewhat, I'm not really sure, industrial look, let's say, high density look, not exactly great looking look, yeah, in these kinds of places, these kinds of roofs here and there to have that contrast. But obviously we also have these kinds of green spaces on the roofs. I'm not really doing them too much as I could. I did them in the downtown a little bit more, but over here, I don't know. I just feel like these roofs are okay the way they look right now. Don't really need to do everything exactly the same, do we? Now, there are also these two additional structures on the other side of the older bridge, as you can see over here. They are slightly lower. There is some kind of elevation differences between the bridge. That was actually a major headache. You don't really see that in the time-lapse too much. I was worried it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem, but it won't be. So that's nice. And I finished it off with those red trees. So those are just used because of the color. Yeah, I'm not really thinking about Asturis as in autumn season or something like that. No, those trees are simply there because of the red color. And that's that. Nothing more to it. Oh yeah? Don't look too much into it. Now, then we are done with those buildings. So now we are going to return to the square, to the coastline, to the beach, and do some details in here. Final details. So this beach, like I explained before, is going to have these stairs as the entrance. It's not just going to have it at the square, but it's going to have it just along the beach, along this quay, further downstream, kind of. Well, not really downstream. We are not at the river anymore. We are at the coastline, but well, you see where it is, right? Now, on top of the quay, there are going to be these planters. They will have some palm trees later, just so we have some kind of trees. And I really do want to have the palm trees with the scenery of the beach, yeah, because that's obviously going to add to that tropical look. These are exactly those. Now, these kinds of planters that I'm using up here, it was kind of straightforward to put them on the straight quay, but there on the left, I have to put them... Oh, I eventually cut it away from the time-lapse. I suppose it was too much of a headache. I had to put them on the quay because the quay was curved, and it was also sloped. Yeah, so that's not exactly a favorable situation. And then put the trees there, and on top of that, the quay is not done on the side. So I suppose that I was not showing it because I'm probably going to be rebuilding that in some coming episodes anyway. Right, now by the way, this road that I'm using right here, this is the road that I prepared for Altengrad for that car boom video some time ago. Yeah, this is exactly that road where I needed to have a tram stop with just a single lane for cars on each side. Surprisingly, such a road doesn't exist in the workshop, so I quickly made it in the road builder mod, it's called. I'm always not sure about the name of that mod. I think it's called road builder these days. And yeah, I'm also using it in Asturis. I'm also using the parking lot roads that I prepared for Altengrad in Asturis. So that's actually kind of nice that I can recycle these kinds of assets. Now, it has adaptive networks options, so I can get rid of those pavement medians on the sides of the tram tracks. I can replace them with grass, with intersection marking tools, put some kind of nice trees there. And also, I can continue this into this intersection. So this intersection is going to look super custom. Cars are obviously not continuing into the square, and also on the coastline, there is no road, there is only the pedestrian, the white stone path, yeah? So this road is simply going to turn up into that other street, yeah, that we can see right here, which is connecting into that more important car priority road or something like that, yeah? That's coming from that older bridge. So that intersection eventually turned out looking really great. I also touched it slightly with some procedural objects to really make it much smaller, yeah, the asphalt surface, make it much smaller and kind of extend the square a little bit. Now, this is that detailing for the square. I had these holographic trees probably from day one of Asturis, and I was always not sure where to place them because some of those places that I did were not exactly fitting, but this place is super fitting, yeah? So I'm really glad that I waited with these trees, and finally we can put them over here. Before these, I was actually experimenting with some of those purple trees, yeah? I believe there's also a vanilla tree that's that color, but I was thinking that, I don't know, it's just looking somewhat strange. Let's try the holographic trees, and that was exactly that. That was the detail that really paid off in this particular place, because those holographic trees are also lighting up during the night, as you can see, and that made me think that, yeah, maybe I should probably complement that with some more holographic ads on the buildings. So I added lots of those shop signs and various kinds of ads and just something on those buildings on the square to also push that slightly more higher density feel. Yeah, so we are not out of the high density areas just yet. It's going to be crystal clear when looking at this place that it's kind of an extension of the downtown across this super fancy bridge. Right, then I was doing some other colors, other lights. I was, for example, lighting those weird structures on the waterfront with the red spotlights, because why not? You know, it's a nice color. It's a color that we don't have in that area, so red it is. And then I was putting some other like super bright spotlights on this tallest tower in this area, because again, why not? Yeah. Then I'm just going to do these pedestrian paths, and that's it. Look at that. It's actually a huge footprint that we managed to fill in this single episode, but it's very much needed. Like I mentioned, I only focused on the building blocks that are right on the waterfront, right visible from the other side of the river, yeah, because that's going to be important for the first person ride. And like I already said, I already recorded the first person ride, so it's looking good. Yeah, you definitely have something to look forward to. Look at that. It definitely paid off, building these kinds of weird symmetrical buildings. Imagine if they were not there. Imagine if we had just some kind of continuous quay at that forming that higher level, and below that just some kind of trees. It would be super boring. Yeah, so this fits perfectly. It's just a decoration, but it's just amazing on it. And it's a nice contrast to the beach. The beach, on the other hand, is something completely different. There is just that continuous quay, the wall. Below it is that sandy beach that is a very nice color contrast to all the green areas around it. You can't really see that with this particular shot, but for example, with the previous shot, where you also see the hills above this area, those are going to stay green, of course. It's just such a nice contrast, yeah? I suppose it's also a nice contrast with the bridge. It's kind of going to be a nice contrast during the night as well, so that, you know, the beach is not going to light up. It's just going to be something different. And, yeah, it's all about the contrasts, really. When I'm trying to pick colors, even during the day, yeah, for example, with those red trees. And obviously during the night, that's kind of clear that I'm focusing on that. Well, that's finally these two bridges complete on both ends. I did not really want to overshadow those bridges either, so I was trying to pick some kind of high-density structures, but not really that much. So at this square, we only have that single tower that's kind of big, even though I'm not really sure if it's bigger than the bridge. Oh yeah, it is. Okay, we see that over here. But it's somewhat further away from the bridge, so it's not really competing for height with the towers of the bridge. And I don't know, it's just working. Yeah, we can clearly see all the elements of the bridges and just clearly distinguish them from the buildings. I suppose that's what I was aiming for. And yeah, I think mission accomplished, really. If you look at this picture, then it is pretty much a continuation of the downtown. So yeah, there it is. Anyway, next episode, the first person ride, already mentioned that like 50 million times today, but really, stay tuned for it. It's gonna be great. And there's gonna be a little bonus at the end of that episode that I don't exactly want to spoil, yeah? Just wait. Anyway, thank you for watching today. Hope you liked today's Asturis episode. If you did, then please do the usual. So all the writing and clicking below the video, and big thanks to the channel members who decided to directly support the channel and me, what I'm doing in here. So huge thanks. I really appreciate it. Take care. Goodbye.